Hey guys, I want to talk today a little bit about identifying some different learning challenges, learning disorders, learning disabilities, whatever language we want to use. But I want to talk about identifying them not through maybe the traditional approaches, but through the emotional responses that we see people have. Okay, I'm somebody, and I'm pretty open about this. I'm somebody who has fairly significant reading challenges. Meaning, for me, it's eye tracking. My eyes jump all over the page when I'm reading. When I read a narrative, maybe it's a story, I can usually follow along pretty well because I can tell if the story seems sort of wonky, right? If I'm reading, say, a science textbook, I don't know if I read the fact correctly or incorrectly. So it gets pretty confusing, and it's easy for me to learn things incorrectly through that approach. But I didn't know this. What I knew growing up is that I hated reading assignments. I loved books. Honestly, until I had kids of my own, I used to read probably about 10,000 pages a year of fiction, but it was hours every day of fiction, right? Not nonfiction. It's very different for me. What I knew growing up, I was the slowest reader in every class I ever took, pretty consistently. If there was a class assignment, read these 2 pages, look up when you're done, we'll talk about it. I would be almost done with the first page, and I would realize everybody else was looking at the teacher already. So I would just look up and act like I was done. Or on things, sometimes if everybody else turned the page pretty quick, I'd realize I need to turn the page too. So I'd be lost. These are compensation strategies. That's a compensation strategy for blending in, not for learning. Okay. If I'm reading a textbook on my own, I learned, I don't know, by middle school, if the teacher says read a textbook or read a chapter, I didn't read it. I would read introductory paragraphs. I might read, at those levels, you may see vocab words that are bold. I'd read those. Get the main idea. If there's a chapter summary, that's all I would read. I did that all the way through college. I did that in graduate school. Because my brain doesn't take more information anyways, I'm better off spending that time. And quite frankly, for me, to read a 2-page chapter summary is already going to take me quite a while compared to most others. And so these are compensation strategies for learning. So I would avoid. I didn't do any of this stuff. I would avoid it. I would say I didn't like it. I didn't have any language to say that I had a hard time. Test scores would show that I had low reading comprehension. In particular, if you compared it to other scores that I had, my reading comprehension rates were low without a good way to explain it. And honestly, they were as high as they were, not because, let's say on the SAT, I didn't have these scores because I would read it and turn the page, answer the questions. I wouldn't read it. I would read the questions and I'd go look for the answers, which is that's a test-taking strategy. But for me, it was the only strategy. This was not about test-taking efficiency. This was, I didn't do any better reading it or not reading it. So therefore, I would just read the questions and go look for the answer. Okay? So I had these strong emotional responses. Internally, of course, embarrassment, shame, things like that. Till I was in my 30s, maybe about 5 years ago, I was sitting with a client, a teenager who was describing his challenge, what he faces, and he was calling it these tracking challenges. He's describing how his eyes bounce around the page. And I went home that night. I made kind of a little note to myself. Went home that night and looked it up. And I was reading about this difficulty that people have that completely described my experience. To the extent of, even in college, I took a class that was supposed to help. It was not for credit, but it was supposed to help you learn to be a faster reader. And for me, the strategies didn't work. And as it turns out, because the strategies that they were providing that help a lot of people become quicker, more efficient readers, they don't help if you have tracking challenges. So I was much later in life, and I remember having conversations with people who knew me when I was younger, and people didn't know that that's what was going on. I didn't have any language for it. And there was no academic identifier because in general my grades were pretty good. My scores were good. where my grades were lower, I would have been identified as, well, you need to work harder. You're smarter than that. You should just do better. When in reality, I didn't. I had no way to do it. Okay? So the first thing, I'll tell you my story to have a reference point. The first thing I think we can watch for is students who show a strong dislike for a certain topic, certain subject. You can ask yourself, is there more going on there? Is it that they just really don't like math because they don't like math? Maybe math is harder for them than other subjects are. Or maybe they look at math and it just doesn't calculate in their head. No pun intended. Sorry. But maybe it is dyscalculia. Maybe there is more going on. So maybe I hate that is because their teacher isn't very nice. Or maybe there's more at play. So that's the first thing that I always watch for. It's not always an indicator of something else going on, but it is something worth exploring. I hate that. Okay, well, why? If it's consistent year to year, why? If there's a certain task that a person avoids or says they don't like. So it may be like reading. You read in most subjects. Even math has word problems. So if it's the reading part of it, what's going on there? Is it that somebody's struggling? Again, it may not be a diagnosable level. Maybe subclinical is what we would call it. It is below clinical identification. It's below that level of struggle. But if we look at a person's learner profile, we'll kind of use that language, and something doesn't match the rest of their academics, it's worth exploring a little bit. These emotional responses, I don't like that, or they avoid that subject, or maybe it's a certain kind of task. Do people seem confused by certain subjects? Maybe the directions were written in a different way. Somebody didn't quite get it. Does somebody have a reaction to the way the assignment is given because they struggle to comprehend it in that form? Are people embarrassed about a subject? Do they feel? Do you see somebody who is pretty willing to volunteer and engage out loud in one class, but in another one, they have a lot of anxiety? Or do people experience shame around it? Are there certain subjects that a person is willing to do group work in, which is increasingly part of school, right? Are there things that people love doing group work on this subject, or is maybe a little bit older, like to study together, but in this other one, they'd rather isolate? In particular, for somebody who is struggling more in the class that they want to isolate in. These are things to explore. This is stay connected with your kids, with your students. Watch for these emotional reactions because compensation strategies are very real. I know how to get through a textbook. Even with reading challenges, I can get through a textbook and I can get enough information from the textbook. I can also pay attention in a class discussion and I can join in the discussion. I had a literature class in college that I read some of the stuff, but we had to participate because part of our grade was participation. I never raised my hand first, but I got my participation grade by listening to a few other people. Then I raised my hand, and I agree with Joe. I think that Robin Hood did that too. I got my grade. It's a compensation strategy. Okay, there's a lot of them that people may use. I've got them for how to get some material that I have to get out of there. Worst case scenario for me once in a college course where I had a teacher, a third of their grade came straight only from lecture, so you had to be in class. A third of it came only from the textbook, and a third was overlap. Well, if you have a hard time getting stuff from a textbook, that third it was really scary. I had to go have a conversation with the professor about it, and it kind of guided me a little bit about where to look to find the other third. It's usually obscure points, and so weirdly, if you read the obscure stuff from that chapter, you could do okay in the test. And that worked. But that meant me asking for help, which I didn't learn how to self-advocate until my mid-20s probably. So watch for that. Watch for these emotional reactions and responses. Don't assume that a kid is lazy. Don't assume that a kid is just annoyed or doesn't like something. Explore to see, is there more going on? They may just be bored. They may just not like their teacher. It may be any of these things, or there may be something else. And the sooner we pick up on it, the sooner we explore, the sooner we can intervene. And in many cases, the sooner we can sort of head off bigger challenges. Had I gone to college with even more reading challenges, or had I gone to college understanding how to read, well, college would have looked different for me. High school might have looked different. Yes, I benefit now because I can connect with people and students, clients that I have, but things would have been different. So watch for those. It's a different frame on it. If you got any questions, let me know. Reach out to me. I hope you'll give me a subscribe. Check me out on social media at Sam Marion Counseling. Give me a like, follow, subscribe, comment below. Appreciate you giving me a little bit of your time today.